Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, the podcast that is too on the nose to be living in our modern times. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, we're going to talk about the Overton Window because it's a concept that loosely has to do with psychology in the sense of shifting political norms and driving public discourse by taking advantage of people's implicit biases. Hooray! I would love to stop doing episodes about politics. And yet, it's a bad time in modern history. It's a bad time in history to be, I don't know, trying to take care of your mental health, trying to be mentally healthy. So, let's talk about the Overton Window, what it is, how it sort of came about, and why bad faith actors are able to take so much more advantage of it. The concept came out of like a think tank. It's named after a dude who's like not that old. It's not a super old concept. Sort of this idea of what is considered acceptable by the mainstream public discourse. And it shifts around, it moves. The idea, was it Joseph Overton, was a libertarian, which means deeply ignorant on how things work. Shout out to all my libertarians out there. No, all of you who are in your early 20s, because you don't have the life experience and you think you're still a libertarian. Excited for you to be a leftist when you finish growing up. Joseph Overton thought that the window shifted and politicians, as he understood them, had to figure out where the window was, and that would drive policy. That's not really A, how it works, or B, how we use the phrase Overton window anymore. The generic idea was sort of that anything outside of the window was unthinkable, and that it sort of shifted into unacceptable. And the further up or like further inside the window you were meant it would be like not only acceptable, but then popular, and then finally policy, as if government policy is driven by popularity. What a quaint, novel idea that would be. But it definitely shifts, and we can sort of view this in watching something from the 90s and being like, yikes, that has aged poorly. That shows how the window has shifted as far as what is acceptable in mainstream public discourse versus what isn't. And I think it's interesting because these things shift culturally. But again, I think just sort of naive to suggest that it happens and like no politician or nobody is engaging with it. It definitely is shifted intentionally, I would say, especially by like a concerted effort through a small group. So if you've ever read Edward Bernays' book Propaganda, this is Freud's nephew. I want to get conspiratorial about it. I don't. It's not a fun conspiracy at all. The idea that a group of wealthy people can buy up media and sway public discourse was well established when that book came out in 1927. So to suggest that like politicians don't move the Overton window intentionally is, again, a preposterous concept, especially when you have an oligarchy like we live in right now, where really wealthy people can buy up media. And again, this is not a new concept. You can look at 2025 sort of as like the mask is off, but like not a new concept. When I was in college, I was a cultural studies minor, and I took a class called On Television. We just studied television. It's the class that I did the most reading for, which is a bit shocking because you would think, what I thought when I signed up for it was that we would just watch TV. And we watched some TV. Shout out to whichever professor that was. I don't remember. I've gotten old, but that's who introduced me to Metalocalypse, because we watched that. And that was great. But I did a ton of reading for that class because it was really interesting all this stuff that I didn't know about the behind the scenes of media. And this wasn't like how to film television. This was like 90% of the media is owned by the same 5 companies. And that was true in 1990. And I think it's probably smaller now. I think it is, people say 6 companies, but like these mergers and acquisitions that happen are not, these are not companies in competition anymore. These are oligarchs, again, who own different shell corporations and move some things around to control the narrative of cultural zeitgeist, but really like what's acceptable. That's really what the Overton window is about, is like what is acceptable and what is not. And we have lurched to the right strongly. And it drives me batty that people want to engage with this conversation as if like the rise of Trumpism was somehow a response to like a left shifting Overton window, because we were acknowledging the LGBTQ plus community, that pronouns are part of the English language and different people use different pronouns was somehow an affront. And the Overton window had shifted because people had blue hair. And like, bringing the 1950s are calling, and they're mad that Elvis shakes his hips when he dances. Like, those are not Overton window shifting concepts. Those are culture slowly over time continues to progress. I won't go so far as to say we are progressive, although that is sort of a natural order of things. And that just happens with time. That's not policy related. That's not politician related. That is, people travel the world. They write books about it. They have vlogs because the internet exists. Really, the internet existing shifted a lot. But politically, especially in the US, but other places as well, I mean, there's a far right movement that is spreading because people are unhappy with capitalism, and a quick fix is the strongman pitch. I've talked about this in other places. The false premise that is like the authoritarian strongman who can fix things. But the Overton window in America has definitely shifted to the right as we're discussing things like whether or not people can get access to healthcare. Like, we're stripping basic rights away. We're questioning, not we as in like the American population, because I would say that has gotten progressive over time, but politically the window has shifted right. And that's been a concerted effort by right-wing media, which is, you know, currently just state-owned media following that USSR model. Some of the stuff from, it's 1990s Russia, which, like, spoiler alert, doesn't end well. But it's this idea that having one media entity, so like Fox, right, through the 90s till now, and like Fox is one of the big 5. When you study media analysis and look at how things have shrunk down, Fox was the conservative, quote unquote, right wing. I'm more comfortable saying right wing than conservative because, you know, that has like a weird, I grew up in the 90s and I grew up deeply Christian. And so it's sort of this idea that conservatism is like by nature moral or good, when like, nah, it's just right wing. And again, we've shifted from right wing to like alt-right extremism. And that's where the window has shifted, because things like deporting immigrants while taking in refugees, it's podcasts, so you can't see how sarcastic I'm being, quote unquote, refugees from South Africa. It's like, yeah, that's just based on skin color. And the idea that we're saying Black and brown people aren't welcome into the country, but white people are, is insane. That's not the 1950s Overton window. It is, because again, like Brown v. Board of Education, but that's like 1920s. It's such a preposterous concept. I'm rubbing my eyes. I'm in therapy, you know, like your therapist needs therapy. It's not just a catchy jingle, a catchy title at the top of this. It's my lived experience. I need a place to go and say, how am I supposed to stay sane, let alone help people during this? But the Overton window shifts by like having extreme things get said. And so again, the sane washing that happened, not just in 2024, but in 2016 with Trump. I mean, this is a guy who's clearly got dementia, mental health professional chiming in professionally here. You're not allowed to diagnose other people. So, but my 2 cents professionally, clearly has dementia and like wasn't very smart to begin with. But that's true in 2016. You had somebody in a presidential debate shout, "They're eating cats and dogs," and like that wasn't the end of it. You had somebody pantomime giving a blowjob to a microphone at a political rally, and that wasn't the end of it. I'm rubbing my temples again. We're shifting to the right as if like there's some sort of the Christo-fascist movement has shifted the Overton window right to say we need to get the Bible back in schools. No, we don't. That's not based on evidence. There's nothing that backs that up. There's a shooting not that long ago here in Wisconsin at a Christian school. Like that doesn't prohibit things. Gun control would prohibit those things. So like attacks on the LGBTQ plus community, attacks on women and healthcare, attacks on just skin color have suddenly become normalized again when really it's pretty gross. And I would like to think as a culture have moved on, but the political unit hasn't. And by having a bad faith actor like Fox News, like a right-wing media, be able to sort of be treated equally by the news, and then oligarchs obviously are kicking in because they don't want to pay taxes, right? Like, so that's where sort of a bad faith actor in the system has spoiled the whole bunch, and then that's allowed for corruption. Citizens United in 2010, but going back earlier, I mean, half the Supreme Court justices worked on Bush v. Gore. Like that blatant corruption is just, again, we're 2025 is not this stuff isn't new. This is mask off. This is nobody's trying to hide it anymore. They're pretty sure they got away with just the takeover. And that sucks. but Trump was integral in this because he said nonsensical things. He would get up on stage and talk for 2.5 hours, incoherent rambling, and then there'd be sound bites from that, and there'd be clips that are taken from that. And it's not something that should have happened that way. It's not something that was reported on well, but this sort of fairness doctrine that America like hides behind, where you have to both sides everything because we only have 2 political parties, instead of having like actual laws like other countries have about slander, and not letting slap lawsuits be a thing where like rich people get away by suing poor people into oblivion so that they're never held accountable. Like there are plenty of ways to do this better and to have this modeled where you can be quote unquote fair and balanced without saying that like, hey, people should be housed is as people deserve shelter, people deserve food, we should make sure kids in school have enough to eat, is as realistic a talking point as we should deport people who have a different skin color than us. Like those are not equivalent talking points. One is just blatantly racist, and the other ones are like, these are good ideas, how should we make this happen? So the both sidesing of it all is really frustrating. The fairness doctrine, and again, how like someone who isn't interested in playing fairly just can take advantage of that. We in America frame human rights against fascism as if those are equivalent talking points, and they simply aren't. It's Yeah, I mean, Karl Popper is probably who pop. The pun was unintended, and now I feel bad about it. Karl Popper comes to mind, the paradox of tolerance, that in being tolerant, you cannot tolerate someone who's intolerant, which is what fascism is, right? Like, because they will push through all your tolerance and make things intolerant. And that's sort of what happened with the Overton window, is like wanting to be fair, wanting to be equal, wanting to be balanced, wanting to say, hey, we'll allow for your opinions. And then someone's opinions started being, well, my opinions are facts and you have to treat them as such. And like, no, we don't. We have to respect preposterous ideas. We should be able to punch Nazis in the face. Like, that's a good thing. We should be intolerant of intolerance. because that's a bad faith actor coming in and shifting things intentionally with no interest in engaging with any sort of tolerance elsewhere. And certainly, like, my background with religious trauma sees this around the concept of like religious trauma, how evangelicalism and fundamentalism are certainly first cousins with fascism. Like, you have to respect my religious beliefs, and my religious beliefs say that I'm the only person who's right. Like, that's such circular and like batshit crazy logic. And so it's just one of those things where saying someone who's Christian fundamentalist deserves as much airtime, as much space talking as someone who's queer is like preposterous. Nobody who's advocating for the LGBTQ community is saying everyone should be this. They're just saying, hey, I exist. These people, there are people like me who exist, and we deserve to exist and be allowed space to exist. And that's not what, again, fascism, that's not what the religious right wants. There's a conversion factor that comes along with fundamentalism. I was raised evangelical, so like you're supposed to go save everyone. That's not what leftism is doing. That's not what, again, this sort of idea of being able to say like, hey, I think everyone should have housing, and that's more important than the police having armor piercing rounds and Hummers or whatever they have, like, I'm not for militarizing our police departments, and I think people should have enough to eat. I don't think billionaires should exist. Like, these are not radical concepts, but like it's posited as if that's extreme. And so again, like, the fact that Roe v. Wade got overturned shows we went backwards, right? We went to the right back to 1973. Some of these like Bibles in school stuff, some of the like school choice stuff goes back to the 1950s, Brown v. Board of Education, which is when the religious right got politically active because they didn't want to have desegregated schools. It was just racism, and it was married to religious zealotry. And that's where we're at now, because no one wanted to like be mean, quote unquote, for calling that out. The idea that, again, people exist and their differences get to exist because of that as a radical concept is not, it's not. And that's always been the framing, right? The reason the Overton window keeps shifting is because one group, the right, the political right, the alt-right, gets to present things as radical leftists. You're just radical by being on the left side of the political spectrum. Joe Biden was a center-right candidate, acting as if like he was some sort of radical leftist was never the case. But again, that's the framing, and nobody was framing Donald Trump as an extremist. Nobody in the mainstream media was. People certainly were, because he is. But that's sort of the shift. And like the shift was a media that wasn't set up to respond to this, a media that had grown complicit in we are tolerant, and not having that backbone of like, we cannot tolerate intolerance. And so now, again, like, it's 2025, I'm recording at the end of June, we had 2 state senators who were assassinated by a right-wing bigot, a Christo-fascist, and the president has not only said nothing about it, he has not gone to the memorial services. He's not said anything about the act specifically or the victim specifically. He has said the governor of Minnesota, where this happened, is a loony, and like, that's it. And that, again, should be the end of his political career. The fact that he didn't say anything, and the only thing he did say was antagonistic towards another politician when there had just been violence towards politicians in that state, is wild. The idea that we've gone so far to the right that we're normalizing political violence against one group of people is upsetting, to say the least. And I think culturally, again, like, progress happens because people gain lived experience and people interact with people who don't just look like them, and the world is more accessible than it's ever been before to have those experiences. And we sort of know through research and studying people that, like, 60% of people live within 10 miles of their hometown. Like, there are plenty of people who, and That's a statistic about America. I don't know about other countries, the United States. Um, there are people who don't expand their horizons. There are people who grow up listening to Rush Limbaugh and, keep Fox News on and listen to K-Love in the car. And that doesn't allow for any sort of growth or development. And so when all of that media landscape is shifting the Overton window right, then those people are shifting right. But I think writ large society slowly, inevitably moves a bit to the left. And the political movement, because of the lack of accountability within the media ecosystem, has allowed for that. And again, there's just not enough outrage on the left when that has to be grounded in reality, and on the right, it doesn't. Like, that's what the shift is about. That one group decided they would not follow any of the rules, they wouldn't play fairly, and they were not interested in having to back anything up. And without any sort of accountability, we shifted way right, taking people's rights away, taking safety away, normalizing talk about political violence. Again, number of senators who have posted things about AOC experiencing violence, or threatening her, or all those things without any sort of consequence. Like, yep, you say something extreme and then nothing happens, and that window shifts to the right. And, a leftist example might be like defund the police. And that was, again, actively fought against and framed within that window as being unacceptable. Like, that can't be a thing, even though that slogan caught on. It was a nuanced concept of, how do we take this money that statistically isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing and put it towards something that statistically, with research, we know should work better. We know that spending money on social services reduces crime. Spending some of the police department's budget on social services would be a good use of our time. We know that investing money in social services returns on that investment. We get dollars back while we invest in something like the library, or something like Planned Parenthood, or something about like preventative measures being automatically covered and that people don't have to pay for. I'm gonna guess, I don't know this data off the top of my head, but like having ambulances covered would probably be a good return on investment. Like, we get good return each dollar spent on some of these programs. We get like $7-8 back. This is not unique or interesting research. These are well-established things. Countries that do not have problems with homelessness like America does just house people. No one is homeless, right? Everyone is housed, and they get social services, and they get the resources they need to try and like rebound, get back on their feet, become self-sustaining. And that all of those services have good return on investment. And yet public discourse takes something like defund the police, which is reallocate the funds to the militarization of the police towards social services, and like makes it sound like it's radical, right? Having your hair blue has become like a synonym with some sort of LGBTQ plus agenda, as if your hair color somehow can be radical. It's not. Humans have seen the same spectrum of colors for as long as humans have had eyeballs, and it's not particularly interesting, let alone radical. And so again, that shifting of anybody who is on the left is radical, to anybody who's on the left is an enemy, to anybody who's on the left is a target, is what we're seeing. It's what we have seen, and now we're seeing the inevitable conclusion of that, of people who are predisposed to violence being violent towards those on the left. And of course, like, these are right-wing people, right? Like, there's so much data on domestic terrorism being a problem of the alt-right. It is those people, it is white men who are Christian or fascists or both, who are doing political violence. Like, it's not a question. The guy who shot the 2 senators from Minnesota was a pastor. Like, white Christo fascists. Like, there's no facts or data that dispute that. There is no debate here. There is no way to be quote unquote fair and balanced in reporting. One side overwhelmingly is violent to the other side. And when you say, hey, we got to talk about this and give each side fair, equal talking points, one side is, I'm going to shoot you. The other side is, I think we shouldn't have poor people. Those cannot be treated equivalently. They are not equivalent. So I don't have a solution. I just want to like normalize or validate for people who are feeling like living in America is, as someone who like cares about people, is gaslighting is all get out. And I don't use that phrase often. I think gaslighting in the cultural zeitgeist is misunderstood. I don't think people, I as a professional, licensed mental health professional, do not use that the way that, I don't know, BuzzFeed uses that term. So, I mean, there needs to be like a definite concerted effort. Like having the No Kings protests is really great, and the fact that the turnout was so high is wonderful. But like, understand that as a concerted effort to pull the window back left, we shouldn't have a question of whether the laws are for everyone or not. Like, yeah, that's a response to a shift to the right. Healthcare is not a radical concept. Housing is not a radical concept. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is so old to have been disproven that like food, water, and shelter are what we need. Right? Like, yeah, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like, life requires food, water, and shelter. That's the basis of a document written and signed in 1776. Like, if we're debating that, we've gone backwards. The window has shifted the wrong direction. And I think anyone who's doing like the fair and balanced, I think people who are saying both sides, like, we need to call that out as they're not being neutral, they're being complicit. They're not being fair and balanced. They're enabling political violence. They're enabling stripping rights away. They're enabling monstrosities. How many state senators, like, do we need to get a not state senator? Or we need to get a senator of the US, one of the 50? Do we need to be like moving up the chain that way? Because again, that's seen as violence, right? Like Luigi Mangione is violent, according to the mainstream media. That got all sorts of coverage. That got all sorts of police power, manpower of one person taking violent action against a healthcare CEO, whereas healthcare companies routinely on the daily are violent to hundreds of thousands of people. We have tens of thousands of preventable deaths every year through insurance companies declining coverage or not offering coverage or making people go bankrupt and not seek coverage. Like, that's violent, right? Threatening to ban people's existence, saying people cannot exist the way they exist is political violence. And like, again, it's not even like how bad does it have to get? It's that bad. Whatever it is in your head, it's that bad. That's happening. The immigration example is so easy to say. Again, like, not only is it, this shift just happened where it went, well, if they came here legally, but then here's the shift in the window. The Trump administration got the Supreme Court to okay their attempt to say these people aren't here legally. We've shifted the definition of legal, so now we can deport people who were here legally, but we've changed the definition of legal, so now we can deport them. So everybody who was clamoring, well, if they just came here legally, they did. They followed all the rules that existed at the time, but now they're illegal. That's a shift. I'm drawing it out. I'm showing you, but it's a podcast, so you're listening. Like, they did come here legally, but now we've shifted the window so that we can get them out too, because they're not from here. But like, again, this isn't based on any sort of logic or reasoning, because no one's from here unless you're indigenous First Nations, right? Like, and that's not white people. So it's wild to sort of have that window shift in real time of like, oh, well, we got the okay from the very corrupt, very bought and paid for Supreme Court, the MAGA extremists on the Supreme Court, the MAGA corrupt court. Like, that's how we need to be wording those things, because that's the reality of it. Said, oh, you can do this. And so Stephen Miller, avowed neo-Nazi, said, yay, we get to say these 500,000 people are now, with the stroke of a pen, illegal, and then we can deport them. That's shifting the window. And like, this is stressful to have a functional brain in this time. It's stressful to have empathy and care about people during this time. But this is also just harmful for mental health to have something, anyone, any minority group is harmed by this. This is bad for their mental health. The LGBTQ plus community, women, just in general, but women who are seeking healthcare, women who are struggling with a medical condition, women who are dealing with any potential fallout of a pregnancy, medical emergency during a pregnancy. Like, it takes this is okay to talk about and shifts it back to this isn't okay to talk about anymore. And so progress of like, it's okay to talk about having a miscarriage. It's okay to talk about having an abortion. Like, it's okay to talk about not wanting a kid right now or not being able to support them. It's okay to talk about your doctor didn't listen to you. It's okay to ask for your doctor to meet your needs. It's okay to request the support that you need. And suddenly those things get stripped away, right? It's okay to go to therapy. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay for somebody to not want to talk to their parents about coming out because their parents are Christians and religious zealots and will disown them. And so that kid can go and talk to their school counselor. Well, like, no, now it's not. It's not okay for them to talk to their counselor. It's not okay for them to talk to their doctor. Like, that's the real life impact of shifting public mainstream discourse into saying this is acceptable versus this is unacceptable. And we know this is where abuse thrives, when we make things more about secrecy, when we limit people's access to resources, to knowledge, to being able to make an informed decision. That's where abuse thrives, which is why there's so much abuse in the church. Like, right? Like, because there's a lack of access to information, there's a lack of accountability, and like, consent isn't a thing. But also, it's not okay to talk about some things. There's a right and a wrong. And so if you're talking about something that's in the wrong, you're in the wrong. There's no accountability for the people who have the power to do the abuse. And you're stuck then, like, keeping the secret. And that's where abuse thrives. And that's why the religious right is pushing for this. That's why authoritarians and neo-Nazis are pushing for this. Because, like, the unholy alliance that is the right wing in American discourse right now is the safe haven for abusers. That's why people who have sexual abuse cases come to the public knowledge, like Russell Brand, find God and shift to the right, because that's friendly. Which is why abusers throughout history have gone on to be priests, have gone on to be Boy Scout leaders, have gone to these places where there's secrecy and there's a lack of accountability. And that comes to shifting the discourse of what is acceptable and what isn't. We're going to deport felons. We're going to deport dangerous criminals as a talking point, as given by a convicted rapist. Like, yo, somebody's missing the plot in that. And so, you know, on a microcosm, a licensed marriage family therapist, I do the religious trauma stuff, I see the abuse there, but like, this is also how it works in family dynamics, where there's rigid boundaries, keeping outsiders out so that the family secrets are protected, and the things that are okay or not okay to talk about within the family. We don't talk about how creepy Uncle Bob is, or we don't talk about the weird way Grandpa acts when he has the grandkids sleeping over. Like, that's the difference between, you know, on a small scale ecosystem like a family. That person who says, hey, this person abused me, is often outcast in the family, where the abuser is protected. The family coalesces around abuse often because, whether overtly or not, they've agreed to protect the secret And then when someone doesn't do that, they're in that out group. And so like that's how the Overton window is about public discourse, but shifting what is acceptable or not acceptable to talk about in a small way in a small community also happens that way. And so that's where people who speak up, that's where people who stand up for themselves, advocate for themselves, try and create some accountability are often ostracized because that same concept exists small scale within small groups, whether it's a religious group or it's a small family or whatever that dynamic is. That person who's speaking up about something that is unacceptable to talk about, even if it's about safety, even if it's about their human bodily autonomy or their right to exist, if that's talked about in a way that is considered quote unquote unacceptable, then that person is the person who's the problem, not the abuser. And so we see this small scale, we've studied it and written about it, and people study sociology and psychology and like know that there's all this stuff. But again, like the shifting of the right is look at which books are being banned, look at whose existence is trying to be snuffed out. Like that's the shifting Overton window where, the Bible, which is sexually explicit, full of genocide, full of all sorts of lifestyles, polygamy comes to mind right away, is okay, but something like, I don't know, my grandmother's hands, like maybe that's not in the like school library, but like all sorts of graphic novels, blankets comes to mind as one that gets banned that like I've read. It's fine. It talks about abuse and being queer, not even like explicit. So yeah, it's a stupid time to be alive, and you have these bad faith actors like Moms for Liberty and whoever else engaging in the culture wars, let alone like Fox News and whatever other right wing. And like these people are not serious. Again, like the bad faith actors are very obvious, but when someone is limiting their worldview or limiting their access to knowledge, and this is all they're being fed, like obviously they're going to get radicalized. So that's where lack of accountability, lack of transparency really come through. And that's where like not just mainstream media, but now things like TikTok and YouTube and some of the things that are algorithm driven that are also showing tendencies towards that right-wing pipeline, like that's less problematic. And there needs to be both accountability and transparency so that there's not that shift of the Overton window, because oligarchs, the wealthy, people who own the media, who can buy the media, are going to be down for that because that makes it easier for them to stay in power. There's a vested interest in wealthy concentrating their wealth. That makes sense. The Overton window. It's like I don't know. I don't want to say it's a silly concept. It's just something that like, again, it drives me batty when I see any sort of discourse between mainstream media or if it's even online to be like, well, this is a response to the left making me use pronouns. Like, hey, sorry to your fourth grade teacher who taught you pronouns and you're too dumb to learn it then and you're still too dumb to understand it now. But like, you've always used pronouns. Who dropped their keys? It's like that classic example. Again, the fact that hair dye exists and people can walk around with blue hair doesn't harm anyone. I mean, it harms that person's hair. I don't think these hair dyes are good for your hair. Like I support your right to make your hair worse. If that's what you want to do. Support your right to make your hair better if that's what you want to do. All the people who are opposed to gender affirming care but take their hair growth pills. It's gender affirming care. Elon Musk's plastic surgery. Donald Trump wears fake tanner and makeup. What are we doing? Such a stupid time to be alive. It's not even a stupid time to be alive. It's a wonderful time to be alive. And it's a stupid time to be cognizant of how dumb our politics are. So, with all of that, protect your peace, find your joy, build community, mutual aid. No one should be unhoused. No one is illegal on stolen land. There we go. I don't know, y'all. That's what I got. Maybe I'll put some books for, I don't know, The Paradox of Tolerance, Manufacturing Consent. Shock Doctrine comes to mind. Nobody's Normal. We got some books we can drop down as resources for people who want to read more. Pleasure Activism would be good. Embodied Activism. Yeah. You know, if this is of interest to you, I'll probably have like a YouTube review of Andor. It's a Star Warsy. There's laser guns in it, but it's saying the same thing I just said. I have some exciting guests coming up on the podcast who will talk about this with some specificity around like the right-wing, alt-right, neo-Nazi movement. So keep your eyes for that. If you're like, Jeremy, these topics are sad and depressing. If you're like, Jeremy, these topics are sad and depressing, please talk about something else. You know, leave me a 5-star review wherever you're listening to the podcast and say what topics you want. Or, you know, email me or follow me on the socials. I don't know, people. I'm bad at using the internet, and I want you all to be well. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Peace.